back to our agenda. The next item on our agenda is a report from our CAO on organics diversion strategy.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So, report number 4 is just brought forward for the committee's information. This was not in the package of information that was at the January 25th solid waste special committee meeting that we also had. And so, going through and putting this package together, staff felt that it was relevant. It was information that was gathered, and I know that some of the elected officials had actually participated in this workshop. So it's just a summary. It's just here for information, and we can certainly speak to any questions related to the process that the committee might have.
Okay, Director Pratt.
We're actually on number 3, not number 4. CAO lobbies reference number 4. We're actually on number 3.
Yes, we're on number 3.
Sorry, my apologies. My apologies there. So, report number 3 is the organics diversion strategy, which our presenter spoke to, and it was actually in the package of the January 25th meeting. So, again, staff are happy to answer any questions that were perhaps not covered off in the presentation related to report number 3.
Director Pratt.
I'm curious on what the town of Gibsons has for what the rate was on the organics strategy, on their organics program, what their diversion rate and how long that program's been running. That's a number I haven't seen in a while.
And he will be able to answer that. So, yes. So Manny, your answer is. The diversion rate for the organics in Gibsons. What's our experience currently?
Director Pratt.
And then the follow-up is, how long has that program been fully implemented now?
Director Seegers.
Sorry, could you explain what 45% means? 45% of the households, 45% of what could be collected. What is 45%? So you're saying 55% is now going to the landfill versus the 100% before? Yes. Thank you.
Director Hiltz.
I think I'm not sure where it is, if it's in the report. Is any organics banned from the landfill now? Because on the website I can't see anything that says that there's a organics, like a commercial ban. So I'm just looking for some clarity around that.
Yeah, staff, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Currently, there is no actual ban in place for any organics to be brought to the landfill. Over the summer of 2018, we've been engaging with haulers, local governments at staff level, as well as commercial and institutional producers of organic waste to map out a process for the implementation of the ban. And those discussions are still going on, and we will report back to the board shortly on on the process of actual implementation of a commercial and institutional organics ban on landfill.
So follow-up, so details are following, or they're in the pipeline to come to the board then?
Yes, we're working on it, and it is one of the processes that we consider to be important in this discussion.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to further say that in Carrie's presentation, there was a chart with dates and for different diversion strategies. So if we could get an update on where all those strategies are at, that would be helpful. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. So definitely that slide was one of those foundation pieces. There was also reference to a work plan, and so we would see value in bringing that back to the board so that there was and either validating that timeline or making changes to it. So definitely, for sure.
Should we make a motion requesting a report? And can you give us a rough timeline on this? Like next month or the month after?
I think we certainly could try for March, but for sure for April in terms of things. And certainly there's happy to make staff are happy if there is a recommendation that we bring back the work plan for the solid waste division alongside the organic diversion strategy implementation timeline. Those are the two pieces.
Would anyone like to make that motion? Second? Okay. Any further discussion of that motion? Okay. Director Lee.
I'm kind of curious. Are we talking residential, or are we talking the net effect on our dump, considering both the commercial sector and the residential sector?
Staff, please.
The work plan is included currently in the organic strategy, encompasses both. There's a residential component to it. Some of the actions are more focused on residential, while others are more focused on commercial. So I think this motion, the work plan, which is subject of this motion, would encompasses both audiences.
Good. Director Theis?
Yeah, so from Carrie's report and sort of from everything that I've learned so far, it seems that there's a big need to do a lot of educating and marketing and making sure that this is rolled out properly and that the public is aware and so that we get that buy-in. For example, I thought opting out was going to be a total necessity, and now, just learning that Gibson's has only done it for those who have actually proven that they're fully diverting everything. I didn't know that before, and I'd like to hear more about that. And then also that, it's probably going to be, in the 90-some% of people that probably wouldn't be part of this opting out. So I think it's key that we market this properly and educate the public. And I'm wondering as to what extent the board is going to be part of this marketing and implementation plan, because I think how it's communicated is going to be way more important than how it's communicated is almost more important than how it's actually going to be implemented.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we're slightly off topic. If we could deal with this motion to have a report back on the update. Could you read the motion back? Thanks.
Yes, I have that a report with this updated solid waste division work plan and an updated diversion strategy implementation plan be brought back to a future meeting.
So can I call the motion on that, please? All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Right. So next topic. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think that begs another motion, though, that staff also report back on what the communication strategy or communication plan is around implementation. And even if there isn't one at this point, we need to know where we are. Are we just starting it? Is it something thought about? Is there a lot of work done into it already? Where are we at with regards to communication plan? So I'd make a motion that staff report back on process or the where we are with regards to a communication plan around this, and how they envision potentially directors taking part.
Second? Director Tighe? Or you just? Seconding. Okay. Do we have any further discussion on that, or Director Lee?
Our first motion was asking for the timeline and the actions, right? This might be a work item on that plan. I just would be curious if it was.
Staff, please.
So yes, just to help, the work plan does have a section that is related to communications, but this further motion that's being contemplated is also valuable because there has been some communication plans drafted, and it would be also very timely to bring them back. So staff are supportive of the two motions and would see them coming to the same meeting so that directors can see it more comprehensively.
Director Pratt?
Yes, and the part of the success, I mean, the huge success that Gibson's has had with theirs is it was directly with communication, engaging the community, and the counselors were very involved with that process as well, which really helped with buy-in. So I'd certainly offer up myself to because the diversion rate that we've had in our family from embracing recycling and diversion within our own family has been incredible, and I would say we're a pretty typical family on the coast. So I think I'd be happy to be a poster child. So
okay, further discussion, or shall we? All right, then I call the motion. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. All right, in terms of process, I believe we're still at report number 3. Perhaps, do we want to continue discussion, or do we want to move on to report number 4? Director Lee.
It's a question, I guess, of staff. In Area A, we do have that private company that's picking up garbage, and it seems to me we should be encouraging them to pick up the organics as well. Is there something we could do to work with them to see if it's possible, or maybe even if there's some incentive somewhere that could help her get that done?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So that probably is a good question when you get further into the agenda reports in terms of discussions around what the board would like to do in terms of it. At a high level, I know staff have had conversations with the hauler in Pender, but not specific with organics and what they would do with it. So yes, there's opportunity. That probably is a good place when you get to report number 6. That would be staff's suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. So perhaps we could move on to report number 5, which was the solid waste workshop summary. We already had the introduction. 4, sorry. Annex B, yeah. Any further comments or questions on Annex B? Director Pratt.
just a couple of general questions because it fits in with everything that we've been discussing today is in regarding the landfill. Curious about when we get the new estimate on the life and on the life estimate of how much longer we have left, and at what point do we talk about where the next one is going, and just over, ask staff what that process is, along with the solid waste management plan. At what point do we look at renewing it, and the plan monitoring committee, the public, when will they be meeting? When will we be assigning public members there?
To staff.
So, yes, we've engaged our engineering consultants to provide the revised estimate for 2018, so up till the year end, in order to provide those calculations for our financial statements and for our auditors. So that's anticipated to be received by the end of the month, and staff can provide a further report on the outcomes of that in March sometime.
Director Hiltz?
Oh, I
Sorry,
still have
Director
more questions.
Pratt, follow up.
And at what point in this process do we talk about where our next landfill is going? And then I also had the questions around the solid waste management plan and the plan monitoring committee.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So lots of good questions there. Staff recommend that if the board would like to contemplate further information and discussion related to landfill, citing a landfill or that process, that's something that this staff have not generated. And so a recommendation would be in order that we bring back some information and in terms of that process. And certainly staff could also bring back information around the committee itself. There have, both recommendations to do that. One's probably easier to do and do it in a timely fashion around the committee itself. The second is actually the solid waste plan amendment, and inside of that, how the landfill process would do. So we haven't generated those types of reports. So this is again not timely in terms of things.
Okay, Director Pratt. Okay, are we sure that we know exactly what this motion is?
So this would be a request from staff for an update on the process to get a new landfill, what we need to have in place, because one of the, I won't go into detail, we need to have a diversion strategy before there's steps that we have to take. So we request staff to provide a report letting us know what the steps are into getting a new landfill, and also an update on the solid waste management plan. So it's kind of two motions, I would say.
Staff?
So great, we just reversed it. So an update on the solid waste management plan, including what steps would be required for the landfill, because you would have to amend your plan in order to actually get to the landfill. So it's what have we currently done with an update on the plan, including the landfill site process.
Good. That sounds good to me. Any seconders for this motion? Good. Any discussion of the motion? Director Seegers.
Sorry, including discussion of siting, size, and location, or siting, size, and process for a new landfill, I think is what we need. Right.
Director Beamish.
I think that following through with Director Tice's recommendation of identifying a climate crisis, we're also in a crisis relative to garbage and water. And all of these things need to be looked at. I mean, we don't have time to not look at them, and so that I think they have to all have priority. And having that information as to what the next steps are and what we need to do and how we go about it is really critical. So I support this.
Good. Director Tice.
I think one of the things is not only a siting of a new landfill, but also maybe looking at the options of expanding the current landfill as part of that discussion. But I guess that's that all comes with the new waste management plan.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. Do we want to put a timeline in for when we want this back? And that would be to staff.
Staff, please.
Thank you. In terms of timeline, given the other motion, we would like to suggest that we would bring a report back on this in Q2.
Could that be added to the motion?
Yes, okay. That's so let us vote on amending the motion to add reporting back in Q2. All in favor, please. Thank you. All right, we're on to the main motion. Is everybody happy with it now? Director Lee?
Just, I made some notes, so I want to make sure the motion covers the issues. I believe we need to update the solid waste management plan, and we need to ensure our diversion strategy is understood, including the forecast of the effects on our existing dam and some way of tracking whether we're meeting them. And we need to consider expanding the existing landfill, the cost of doing it versus the cost of new and the practicality. And, of course, Director Beamish mentioned a new landfill, and I think we covered that. Is all of those issues in that motion?
I think we're covered off, staff.
Yes, they're in there.
Good. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. This is it's a question on, it's related to the motion, and page 41, it said investigate engineering options for increasing capacity at the Seashell landfill. That was adopted in November 2017. So I'm just wondering if the reports that are going to be brought forward have an update of what have there been engineering options for increasing the capacity. I'm just wondering if it's all tied together here again.
Staff, please.
Thank you. It is definitely all tied together.
Are we ready to vote on the motion? All in favor? Thank you. All right. Perhaps we should move on to item 5, the report on curbside collection. Oh, wait. Director Ties.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the workshop questions that were done in the in number 4 here, starting on page 51, and I just thought that both the questions and the answers lack some specificity, and so I just wondered how can people objectively answer if you don't know what the frequency, the cost, the type of container, the wildlife considerations, the type of vehicles that are being used, and the cross-contamination risks were not discussed in some way, shape, or form. So I just kind of wondered what the validity of this workshop and the questions that were received afterwards were. And I don't know if staff has a comment on that. Maybe this is just a very brief summary of what was actually discussed.
Does staff have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. So the intent really for this workshop was really around sort of the collaboration and seeing where the opportunities were. It didn't drill into those specific type of questions. That wasn't the original intent or focus of the discussion. And so Carrie McIver referenced that she also participated, so she did a presentation. It led to some discussions and some sharing with our elected officials. That was the intent of the workshop.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on that agenda item? Seeing none, perhaps we can move on to item 5, curbside collection services, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. So this report again is just brought forward for information and sort of also to help sort of set the understanding, if you will, around the earlier reports where staff had brought forward results of the RFP. And so this is just for information. This is where staff had gathered the scope, if you will, for that RFP. It was through this process. And as you can see in the recommendation that was adopted by the board of the day, that is what we would, as staff, identify as a service level or a policy type of a decision. So those are some of the things that we're looking for direction when we get to the next report, is what is this board wanting to see in terms of curbside services, and specifically staff are looking for some direction around organics. So this is, again, just for information, but this is how the scope was identified.
And I'd just like to ask a clarifying question. So at this point, we have signed a contract for weekly curbside garbage pickup in all the rural areas for 3 years? And the rest of it is in the air. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. So the motion that the committee had endorsed was that services would be scoped with Waste Management for 1 weekly pickup and bi-weekly pickup, and that staff would report back on the financial implications to that. So staff are still working through that process right now, and we do need to come back and share that with the board. So no contracts have been executed as of yet. The next step would be to report back. And you are correct. In related to the other curbside services, being organics and recycling, the board has said we want to reevaluate those and perhaps set different policy directions. So the discussion that you would have is not within the context of this current RFP. You have an opportunity to hit reset, if you will, and make different decisions related to that.
And as another clarifying question, so if we continue at the moment with weekly garbage pickup, do we have the option to move that to bi-weekly at the time that we implement, for instance, an organics program?
Thank you, Chair. So that is the discussion that staff are currently having. That was what was in the motion that the committee adopted, was to come back to have discussions around what a weekly would look like and what a bi-weekly would look like and what the transition would look like through that process. So it's intended to be flexible within a certain context and a certain framework. And we're working out those details, and we'll come back as quickly as we can.
Questions, discussion? Director Seegers.
Thank you. I guess this would be a question for staff. If I look at the report on pages 106 and 107, it actually indicates that the previous board identified that food scrap should be picked up weekly, recycling bi-weekly, and then bi-weekly garbage once food scraps and recycling are implemented. On page 107 at the top, it says the curbside food waste collection service for all SCRD residents that currently receive curbside garbage collection in electoral areas B, D, E, and F. So, again, question for staff, is this what we're moving forward with? Or are you looking for confirmation that this is what we're moving forward with? I'm just looking at what the next steps here would be.
To staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that is exactly what staff are looking for confirmation, that we're still proceeding along those lines and that they would work in tandem, the garbage and the curbside organics. And from the conversation that happened in January with the committee, staff understood that the current board would like to reevaluate some of the decisions that related to how organics was delivered, which we would call service level types of decisions, is what is being contemplated today. So the answer is yes.
So, for instance, if we wanted to know what would be involved in implementing a program similar to Gibson's in the rural areas, we should ask for more information on that. Well, I, for one, would be very interested in knowing what would be involved in implementing a very similar program to Gibson's in the rural areas, particularly ENF, and the capacity, frankly, of the local. I don't know if that would be part of the report, but for instance, Salish Soils to provide that kind of service for that much of an area. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I don't know what you're asking. Sorry. Similar to Gibson's, what are you actually asking for? Are you looking for weekly organics, opt-out? What are you looking for when you're talking about similar to Gibson's?
Weekly organics with an opt-out. Similar system in terms of bins. Director Theis.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add Area D to that as well, because as Director Beamish has mentioned, the green waste transfer station works fairly well, and it includes Roberts Creek. And now I'm not sure as to what area. I think Area A has a green waste transfer, or you can bring your green waste to the transfer station there. I don't know what Area B does, but I think the Gibson's green waste transfer station works well for D, E, and F. So I think something similar to what Gibson's in bin size, as well as weekly pickup, would probably, with the option to opt out with some stringent requirements to the opting out, would be something that I think Area D would also be in favor of.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. So you're looking at, sorry, the 107, page 107. First bullet. So you want to look at residential curbside food waste collection for BDNF with weekly collection and small bins, is what I'm hearing. And then what about recycling?
I think we might deal with those two issues separately. So if we could stay with organics at the moment. Do we have a motion that we all agree on here? Yes. What is the motion at hand?
Thank you, Chair. I have notes that food waste collection weekly in areas B, D, E, and F with small bins similar to the town of Gibson's.
Staff, please.
For our purposes, it would be beneficial if the motion would clarify if manual or automated or semi-automated pickup would be preferred.
I believe the town of Gibson's is a manual pickup system. Any further comments on that motion? Did we include the opt-out feature, or should we handle that separately? Okay, we'll handle opt-out separately. So is everybody happy with the motion? Could I have a vote, please? All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Any confused? No? Okay. We'll keep going. I don't know whether we want to deal with opt-out right now. Why not? Yes, I would. I'd like to see a report on the implications of an opt-out program. I think that's all the motion has to say, but I'm interested in, particularly based on the town of Gibson's experience, what kind of staffing support would be needed to make an opt-out program work. Director Theis.
Yeah, and I think what should be added to that would be the criteria for opting out, and what, and I guess we can look to Gibson's on that as well, and then I think also the communication plan, which was sort of, well, I guess that's further on down the road, but yeah, okay, the criteria I think is key.
Director Beamish.
If I may, certainly our staff be available to discuss that with you. And my understanding of the opt-out is it is based upon an affidavit and not an investigation, so that the users have to apply annually and in an affidavit confirm that they meet all the criteria that has been established, and that's what's done. So that we don't go actually and sneak around backyards and looking for people and putting scraps in their yards.
Staff, please.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps we can say an opting out program and financial implications. Just in the regional district, the financial complexities to that. So that would actually encompass all of those components that you're looking for.
And I don't know if I specified an opting out program for organics. Yeah. Director Lee.
This is more of a process question. These curbside collection services, I believe they're paid user pay. In other words, there's zero net tax at the end of the day here. Is that correct?
Question to staff.
Sorry, Chair, can you have the question repeated? My apologies.
My question was the services we're talking about right now are curbside collection, which is actually paid by user fees in each area, so that we're not talking an actual tax implication. Is that correct?
Staff, please.
So I think that would be all the considerations. The current curbside collection service is with participants B, D, E, and F, which is funded through user fee and parcel tax. So essentially, if some of these other types of programs or restrictions were contemplated, we could explore how some of those initiatives could be funded. For instance, Area A doesn't participate in some of this, so if there are some program implications, how would that be considered? How could we consider funding those types of things? So I think we have to take all of these cumulative recommendations together and understand how they all interrelate to the various functions from the regional district's perspective, how they interrelate to one another. So I don't think there's one answer to it, but essentially, yes, they're from user fees, but would that be the end result? We don't know yet.
Director Lee.
My concern is from any future possibilities on how we go forward. If we had a standard process and a standard infrastructure, then we could consider economies of scale between all of us. So I think the discussion is probably relevant to everybody. What prompted it, of course, is that I couldn't vote on that last motion, and I don't believe that the municipalities could have either, actually, and yet it affects all of us. So I was just wondering about the process. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I believe District of Sechelt and Town of Gibsons are part of the solid waste function. So even though we also have our own that we pay in our municipalities, we also pay in here. Yeah. We pay through the function.
Staff, please.
Thank you. So, of course, who's a participant in a service? At this point, all of the committee is just asking for information. So this is a good thing, and everybody will have the information. When final decision points are made, then that's when who's in the service and who pays and all those sorts of things will come up. Staff would recommend we not get caught on an information report at this stage, because there's a lot of work and a lot of really hard decisions to be made in the future.
Director Lee.
So I believe it's okay if I take part in the discussion and vote? Great, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Could we get our strange motion read back again?
I have notes that a report be brought back on an opt-out program for organics and the financial implications of such a program with staffing support needs, criteria for opting out.
We should add for the rural areas. Right. Is everybody in favor of this motion? Sure. Okay. Thank you. And now I think we move on to the question of recycling pickup. Do we have any comments from especially the rural directors who are affected? Director Pratt.
I struggle with curbside pickup for rural areas because of the unique nature of each rural area, and granted, we're already we're already doing garbage pickup. We're looking at the organics. There once upon a time there was an idea about having a small resource recovery center within each community. And similar to what's going on in Grips, what's going on at Gibson's Recycling Center. And from a personal standpoint, from our family, that works very well because we can collect everything, take it to one place, and it's all gone, rather than having it piecemeal, some being picked up, and some we have to take somewhere anyways. Granted, I understand that it's not convenient. It's not, for some community members, they're just not able to do that because of transportation issues. And not everybody wants to take their recycling on the bus with them if they have bus service in their area. So I'm a bit torn on this, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure where to go with it right now. And I can say from our family, we collect everything. We divert as much as we can within our own household, and we take it in once or twice a month. That's my husband's job, but and the kids. But and honestly, what we do is we take our stuff to Grips, and all of our organics we take down to Salish. So we have a combined way that we do things because that's what works for our family, and we live in the northern part of Half Moon Bay, so it's very easy for us to go either place. So,
Director Ties.
I have a question to staff, and just on the previous RFP, they said that the pickup was for packaging and for paper, and I just wanted to get some more specific description of what packaging meant. Was it just solid plastic? Was it film plastic as well? And so what was involved in that? And I do have similar concerns to Director Pratt, and I think for area B and D, it probably makes more sense than for areas E and F, and so I think the decision. This decision for them is, of course, theirs, but I think that's. So I think, I'll go with Director Pratt's concerns, but the question about what was included in actual recycling or in the packaging.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. What's included in curbside recycling is actually defined by Recycle BC, and it's based on their sorting process and their processing process. So, for example, plastics, film plastics, are easily wrapped up in all kind of machinery, and that's why they're excluded from curbside pickup. And also, if you look at volume, it's primarily paper and cardboard and all kind of containers that are taking up the most space in residents' houses. So that's why those are targeted for curbside pickup at the moment.
Director Lee.
Lots of notes. I'm following up on what Director Pratt said. We're very similar in Egmont and Pender, and we're actually big into recycling and kind of do it yourself. And we understand the need for garbage reduction, and we take things ourselves to the drop-off, and we often do it by a truckload, and you'll ask why. And that is because we have lots of part-time residents, and we have neighborhood supports, and some of us with trucks will volunteer to do it, and it's a regular occurrence. And we do take separate loads to grips as well, and it's a do-it-ourselves, our recycling is. And it's the part-time residents in Pender, of course, are like almost 50% of the residents, and it's very peculiar about part-time residents. They're already used to recycling, but they all pile it a little different because there's different rules in each part of where they come from. But I'd sure like to see, and the reason I'm mentioning all this is I think there's a need for more education, and the more education is to refine the process, and that issue is costly at first. But once you get it in, that need disappears. People teach each other. My son teaches me. So I think we need to really consider the more education in this, and we need to consider the drop-off as has been mentioned, but with a definite strategy on the drop-off to get what we need. So, and the last thing I'd like to say is that in Pender, we have a private contractor that does it, and it's quite efficient because he does the commercial and the residential. And in a small area, you can have a local business that does it, and it's really nice to see a local business. And if you can support a local business, I think everybody's willing to do that. So those are my comments, and I think those are the things we need to consider going forward.
Director Ties.
So, probably the biggest question I have around the recycling bit is the size of container. And if we're going to do bi-weekly pickup, is it just, are we doing this similar to the blue bin that's common in Vancouver? Or is it, are we going to go bigger than that? Are we going, those are kind of my concerns. I don't think we should, I doubt we'll have a semi-automated pickup for recycling only when everything else is manual. So just the type of container that would be used and what the color of the container would be and how that would be handled.
I'm glad we're down to color. Director Beamish.
I think I do share the concern for people who don't have vehicles and don't have the ability to get to a recycling depot and some seniors. And I think we need to find some way to accommodate that. But I find that recycling at the depot, we use the depot in Gibsons. It's an educational activity. It's a social activity. I can get all my books there because they have a book bin, so I can pick up my books. And it's a very well-run operation, and I think that one that we can be very, very proud of. And I think we need to start taking some leadership from our youth and our children, as Director Lee says, educated by the kids. Kids are becoming much more aware, and a lot of it is because they're going to these recycle depots, and they know that what goes in what bin and what is recycled, and they're helping out with it. I signed a petition the other day brought forward by some youth to encourage Tim Hortons to have recyclable cups. And I remember a youth movement there recently for getting rid of disposable single-use plastic bags. And I think we need to build more on that youth movement to educate and to support our older people in decision-making. But I really, for my purpose, my household purpose, my neighborhood purpose, the drop-off site is ideal if they can be well run, well located, and they're very sociable activities to go there, and it becomes a habit and educational habit. I appreciate that. So, and I don't think we're going to go to recycle bins in Gibson. So.
I'm just going to jump in here from the perspective of Area E. I'm very concerned about diversion, and I realize that curbside would probably give us the highest diversion rate, but the cost in Area E with no subsidy from Recycle BC is kind of a deal breaker for me at this point. Areas E and F are quite close to Gibson's Recycling Depot. A lot of residents use that service. And I would be interested in any, thoughts about how we could improve recycling rates in our areas short of going to a regular curbside pickup. Perhaps investigating any strategies that have been tried in other rural areas in the province to improve diversion. It's a problem, but over $100 per resident on top of our existing tax increases is an awful lot of money. Director Theis.
I'm just brainstorming here, but I'm thinking that if we were to have some kind of a communication hub here at the SCRD about those people that can't make it to the depots and they can register themselves on a list, and then somehow there's a way for a way to communicate with the neighbors and say, hey, these people are in need. Can you sort of start creating some of that community aspect of getting people to help their neighbors get their recycling to the depot, rather than having some sort of curbside pickup. It's just an idea.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I do know that we negotiated with and chose Waste Management, so I'm wondering what, in that contract, what does it say about recycling services?
Staff?
Thank you, Chair. So specific to the regional district in terms of things. So when the RFP was issued, there was opportunity and flexibility by design of the RFP that any one of the three streams could be awarded or not awarded. And so from the regional district rural area perspective, all of what the board has done is just award garbage, and that is because that term has ended, and there was no opportunity to extend that. So the discussion points have been around curbside organics and recycling. So there's been no award for any of those two services.
Director Seegers.
So follow up on page 108 in our package. What I'm hearing the rural director say is they would like to look at option 3, biweekly garbage and weekly food scraps at this point, and not necessarily go with recycling. But that's a conversation.
Director Hilt.
Thanks, Director Seegers, for clarifying. I think that's from an Area F perspective. The cost of the curbside recycling and the relationship with Recycle BC and the subsidies for the depots is all a big unknown. It seems to be that garbage is looked after. Organics is our big win in terms of greenhouse gases, and there's a lot of wins there. So and the size of bins are an issue for long driveways and elderly people. And so yeah, I think option 3 is kind of where Area F would be looking. Yeah.
I just had a question for staff. In these previous reports, has there been any discussion of a strategy for weekend and seasonal residents? Because that's certainly one thing that I hear a lot from people in my area. We have a lot of people who commute into Vancouver or, several days or live over there part-time, and they can't use the garbage collection service because, of course, you can't leave your bin out on Monday and expect that nothing will eat it between Monday and Wednesday. So has this been investigated?
Thank you. So there most certainly has been a lot of consideration for that in the past, and there's been even some programs that even some of the past directors may be familiar with. At the top of the bypass, one of our contractors, or in collaboration with the chamber, had provided sort of a receptacle there, but that was discontinued. So, and I think the chamber there's sort of a good Samaritan from the contractor's perspective, so there wasn't a lot of charge. But again, that hasn't been there. So there's not specifically a place, because I don't believe that you can drop off garbage at any of the depots. So that's not something that they want to start to do either. You can at the town of Gibsons, okay. So that would be an option, but is that fully aware? Is there sort of a program? Not sure how it's funded, etc. So those things would have to be contemplated. So it's privately funded, but again, we get these things to us. So more to consider.
Okay, Director Lee.
Yes, a follow-up on the weekend question. We have that in spades up there. We do have an arrangement where the island residents can drop their garbage at our Harbour Authority bins, providing they identify themselves, and the taxpayers fund that. Kind of works, but as soon as anybody sees someone other than a customer drop it off, then pretty soon all the weekend people are driving down, and it's a constant, it's a bloody mess, I guess is the best way I can say it. And so I often wonder whether we shouldn't have something like a $2 open the little gate and throw her in, because I don't think that the cost is the issue with those weekend people. It's the ability to do it is the issue. So we need to get creative somehow to look after that. And some sort of a user pay thing. But I do like that little open her up and pay $1 and throw her in.
Staff?
Hearing the discussion and knowing some of the options that are currently in place or could be considered, staff could, if the board committee would like so, report back with some more analysis and options of what's currently in place and what has been historically in place and what might be options to accommodate primarily the temporary residents on the coast.
I like that. That covers, I think, part-time residents and tourists as well. Director Seegers?
Thank you. Not only part-timers, but anybody else who's traveling. You know, if it's my garbage day's Friday, but if I'm leaving town Thursday, you know, unless I get my neighbor to do it, if I can catch them, he's away and traveling, then I have to put mine somewhere too. And I don't necessarily want to freeze my garbage or whatever.
Director Pratt?
I had a question for Sechelt, but I think I'll make the motion as suggested by staff in regards to getting a report, and then I have something else. So just to get that on the table. Please.
Second? Okay.
And I think it's a great option. We do have a high resident, a high property owner, non-resident property owners. So, and then people traveling and everything. So I think that's a great suggestion from RGM.
Anyone else to speak to this motion for a report on temporary resident? All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Director Pratt.
Okay, going back to the curbside recycling, I'm curious what happens in Sechelt, because they have the curbside pickup for recycling, and what happens to the items that are not accepted within your blue bins. What do residents do with those, and where do they go?
We take them to Salish Soils. But I mean, I don't have to go, you know, every 2 weeks. I can go once every couple months.
Follow up?
Regarding the resource recovery centers, similar to what we have in Pender, or what Pender Harbor has in Cripps, what Gibson's has at the Gibson's Recycling Center, and what is started at Salish Soils. Has there been recent conversation around from the past board about implementing resource recovery centers, or was the focus, the decision was essentially to go to curbside and abandon those previous resource recovery center conversations? Because when you look at living a zero waste lifestyle and zero waste principles, as is identified within our solid waste management plan, curbside it helps to support that, but not as far as, not to the same extent as what we would have in a resource recovery center where everything can go. And I've used all of the centers, so I understand how each one of them is set up, and it's fantastic to be able to take everything to one place. So I guess that would be a question for staff on where that was abandoned.
Staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So the current board, or the past board, did not abandon the depot model. In fact, actually confirmed a commitment to the depot model while they went out for a tender or an RFP related to curbside services. So we had no idea what the market would bear, because that was the first time that we were going through that process. And at the same time, the agreement or the contract with Recycle BC was also being contemplated and renewed. So this would be a good opportunity for us to bring back some information related to our depot models and related to the funding and how that works, even from an information perspective. There are some things that we need to contemplate moving forward with the depot models, but that is in the future in terms of some things. So a good opportunity. But the depot model was confirmed by the former board.
Director Pratt.
Does that include an expansion of sites, like within each of the rural areas, or at least one or two of the rural areas? Or just currently supporting the three depots that are, and I'm including so Grips, Salish, and the Gibson's Recycling Center. So was there a look at expanding into the rural areas, or just expansion of support of the current depots that are there?
Staff, please.
Thank you. So the current depot model, which is identified in the solid waste management plan, is the 3, and the contractors that are operating those 3 models are as you have listed, so that would be part of the report back that staff would bring. There was no contemplation or direction to look at further expansion of that, because at the same time they were looking at the RFP for the curbside. So you can understand how there's a lot of moving parts, if you will, here, and we had no understanding yet at the financial implications, and we had not yet renewed our agreement with Recycle BC. So it would have been too premature in that timeline. But that's something that, again, you can consider moving forward if that is something. Once we bring back the reports, you'd have more information around how they're actually funded, what they collect, what the agreement is with Recycle BC, those sorts of things in terms of it. So more opportunity coming. But no, there was no direction to expand it based on the fact we were going out to the curbside RFP.
Director Beamish?
Here's one question I have, and it would be if we're looking at curbside pickup and going to study that further, I'd like to know what the impact of that decision could be on the current depots. Certainly they would be operating on an economy of scale, and if you take some of the materials away from that, does it still make sense for them to operate? And I think that's something we need to look at, because I'd certainly hate to, for the Gibsons perspective, hate to lose the depot model in Gibsons, and I know that they take more than just curbside recycling would take, so that would be something I'd certainly hate to see that impact, and so if that would be part of the reporting, I'd appreciate that.
Director Seegers?
So I think we have to keep in mind we are actually a small community, and it's a small commute. I can travel in Calgary from my daughter's house to my son's house, and it's the same distance as one end of the coast to the other here, and there's way more population there. So if we're looking at implementing more sites, it's going to be really costly, and the amount of material that we're going to collect will even make it more costly. So I think we're pretty well covered with what we have. And one of the reasons that Sechelt doesn't have the same recovery center that the others do is because we have curbside recycling. It's been in place for years. I don't know, do you know what year it was implemented, Paul? 2006. So it's been in place for 13 years already. So that came into play when we set up the resource recovery centers, because we already were collecting a lot of that. So that feedstock basically is not available in Sechelt. So if we were to actually put something else in, there wouldn't be enough material to make it viable for somebody to operate it. So that comes into play.
I'd like to ask if we are going to put a motion on the floor here. Director Pratt, perhaps you would like to entertain putting a motion on the floor.
I'm taking that into consideration. The expansion is not so much. It was a wondering, but those were really good points. I would like to follow staff's the suggestion from the CAO about bringing forward more information to the board on the depot model, and maybe we have more notes on that, or maybe maybe the CAO can suggest.
Back to staff.
Thank you. So the past reports on the depot models and the Recycle BC, those two go in hand. You want to see those two reports or series of reports.
So that's the motion I'll make.
Do we have a seconder? Great. Can we vote on this motion? All in favor? Thank you. All right. Have we exhausted all the fun in report number 5? And perhaps we could move on to report number 6, solid waste rural area service level discussion, some of which I think we've already had. Is there anything further? Any comments from the CAO on that?
No, Chair. This was just an opportunity for more discussion.
I do actually have one other question, though. The invasive species question came up, and it's my understanding right now that there is no legal option for getting rid of your knotweed, for instance, on the Sunshine Coast right now, that nobody's taking it, and that you're supposed to pile it up in your yard to dry and then burn it, which creates all kind of problems in my head, too. Let's pile up more stuff in our backyards to start fires with.
Know that we have a burning bylaw, which bans burning.
Yes, right. So, yeah, we want to ban burning. So what is the status of the invasive species working group? Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. So staff are happy to report back on the status of the program and the next steps. And there are some things that have been worked on at a staff level, but that actually would come through a different committee. It's actually Planning and Community Development is responsible for leading that work. But if you just make a recommendation that you would like an update on the invasive species, let's just call it program, because then it'll be inclusive of what's happening internal and external, then staff are happy to bring that back.
That's great. I would like to make that motion, seconded, to come to presumably the next, or a future planning committee meeting. Good. All in favor? Thank you. Oh. All right. We have reached the end of our agenda. Do we have, Director Pratt? Oh, a motion to adjourn. That's great. And a seconder. So, I believe all in favor of adjourning? Okay. And do we have public questions? Our media is missing again. Okay. Yeah. Is no comments from the peanut gallery? Okay, I guess we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So appreciate the flexibility with the webinar as well. So thank you very much.